Hi, my name's Adrian, and in this video I'm going to show you how to take professional looking photographs of food using just your smartphone camera without any additional expensive photographic equipment. I'm going to show you how I set up a food photograph and then how I develop it using the free to download photo editing app Snapseed. Now, the first thing to talk about with good food photography is good lighting. It's the biggest difference between photos that look professional and photos that look really dull and drab. The mistake I see a lot of people make when they first start taking photos of food is that by instinct they'll take the photo wherever they've prepared the food or where they're planning to eat it, which may or may not be the best place to take the photo. When I first started taking photos of food, I found one good location that was fairly close to the kitchen and it had good natural lighting. I used that same location to take photos of food for years, and it gave me a good predictable situation that I could use to take good photos with very little stress. But what makes good lighting? So what you're looking for is a big source of natural daylight. North-facing windows tend to be the best. They provide the most consistent light throughout the day, but any window will do. If you have a window that has a sheer blind over it, that's even better. A sheer blind will diffuse the light for you and give you a more evenly lit photograph. But if you don't have a sheer blind, you can always use a white sheet. You want the light source to be to either the left or to the right of the food that you're photographing. If your light source is behind you, you'll block the light before it reaches the food and your food will be dark. If the light source is behind the food you're photographing, it'll illuminate the back of the food but leave the front of the food that you're photographing in shadow. And you want some space behind the food that you're photographing. If you put a background directly behind the food that you're photographing, it will look a little bit claustrophobic in the photo. It's better to have a bit of space behind the food so that the camera can give you a bit of a depth of field effect. That's where the photo looks a bit more out of focus on the things that you're not focused on. There's really two main types of food photograph. There is the flat lay style food photograph where the camera is horizontal, placed directly above the food, looking down at it. And there is the angled photo of food. So that's where the camera's at a bit of an angle to the food. Now, most smartphones will use a wide camera lens by default. A wide camera lens can see a lot from side to side, but not as much into the distance. A wide lens is perfect for taking the first style of photo, the flat lay style. Since every camera I know can take a really nice flat lay style photo, I reckon that's the first one that I'll show you, and here's my setup now. So the tripod is really handy for making this video, and I would suggest for making food photographs. It makes the job a lot easier, but definitely not necessary if you don't want to fork out. Now, I've got a textured board here. It's about 70 by 100 centimeters. It's made of old fence palings just nailed to a couple of slats of wood. I have a few of these with different colors and textures on them, and I find them handy for creating a sort of setting for different food photographs. But once again, if you've just got a textured surface anywhere in your house that could be useful, definitely not necessary to make a board like this. The most important aspect of this setup is the light source. The light source is to my left, and that is a north-facing window. The last aspect of this setup is a reflector. So this is a board that I've painted white, and we will use this, placing it opposite our main light source. It will bounce some of the light onto the surface that we're working on and just fill the shadows that are generated on the right-hand side of the food with some light. Okay, and here we have our view through the camera. As you can see, the timber board fills out the whole frame. The light is coming in from the left. This will be a flat lay style photo featuring toast with ricotta and fig. If I were taking the photo with just the one plate, I'd put it right in the center, but for a big composition like this, I'll place elements asymmetrically. I would usually suggest using groups of odd numbers, like 3 figs instead of 2. And I usually include a variety of textures in food photos, so I'll keep offcuts of fabric like hessian around just for this purpose, or odd bits of cutlery. And at this point I'll place a reflector on the right hand side of the image. As you can see, it bounces a bit of light in particular the cutlery and the hessian there lit up when I placed it. Okay, so that was our flat lay photo. I'm really happy with the result, but before we develop it, I might just talk a little bit about an angled photo of food and show you how I take one of those. The wide angle lens that was really helpful for taking the flat lay photo that could see a lot from side to side is actually not so great for taking an angled photo of food. The reason why is that it can see so much from side to side that you tend to get closer and closer to the food, and as you get closer, a wide angle lens makes things that look quite close to the camera look really big and a bit distorted. So if you've only got a wide angle lens on your phone, I would probably suggest that a flat lay photo is a better bet. If you have a second lens on your phone, a longer lens, that will help you to take an angled photo of food. Not all phones have a longer lens, but the iPhone XS that I'm using today does. To access the longer lens on an iPhone, you press the 1x button once. If you press the 1x button and drag it, your camera will digital zoom. That's where the camera uses only part of what it can see through the lens to take a photo. Digital zoom tends to give you those photos that don't look quite as clear or sharp. I'm actually going to be shooting the angled photos of food today using the portrait mode on the iPhone. The portrait mode will use your camera's longer lens by default, which I think will look really good for what we want to do. And now I'll show you how I set up an angled photo of food. Okay, so here we have our view through the camera. I'll swipe over to portrait mode. Straight away you can see the camera's blurring the background for us, and the first thing I do is press that F button at the top left hand corner of the screen. That brings up a slider along the right hand side of the screen which has the letter F followed by a number. Now I've slid it up to f9.0. That means the background is going to be a little bit less blurry. The lower the number, the more blurry, the higher the number, the less blurry. I've placed an eraser under the plate with the toast just to prop it up and get us a slightly better view. And here I'll place a few elements like a piece of hessian again and a cheese knife just to decorate the scene. So this is a second photo, and clearly you can see I've reorientated the camera to portrait format. Once again, I'll press the F number and I'll drop it right back to f7.1. That gives us a little bit more blur in the background, and I'm pleased with the result we've got. Okay, so we've taken both our flat lay photograph and a couple of angled photographs. It's time to develop them. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to use the photo editing app Snapseed. I love Snapseed because it offers you a lot of the functionality of professional photo editing software, but it's got a really simple and easy to use and learn interface. So let's crack that open now. Okay, so I'm going to begin with our flat lay style image because I think there's not too much that we have to do to this to make it look pretty good. To navigate around your image, you double tap to zoom in, double tap to zoom out. You can also zoom in by reverse pinching with your thumb and forefinger. And once you are zoomed in, there's a little blue box inset into a white box at the bottom left-hand corner of the image. You can navigate around your image by moving that box around, or you can two-finger scroll around your image. I'm going to double tap to zoom out again, and I'm going to get started with tools. Now that's in the middle of the bottom of the screen if you've got your phone flipped to portrait. On my screen, it's the middle at the right-hand side of the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is crop the image because I think there's a little bit too much space on either side. So I'm going to bring that in on the left and right, and a little bit at the top and bottom. The next tool I'm going to talk about is Tune Image. To access that, we go to Tools and it's at the top left. Right now it's set to brightness by default. If we put our finger anywhere on the screen and move it to the right, we're going to increase the brightness in our photo. If we move it to the left, we're going to decrease the brightness. With a change being applied, you can actually put your finger anywhere on the screen and hold it, and you can see what the image looks like before you've applied your change, and when you release it you can see what it's going to look like if you apply your change. I'm going to dial the brightness right back. I don't think we need to change that. I'm going to press the slider icon at the bottom left hand corner of the screen and head down to shadows. I'd like to lower the shadows in the photo a little bit just to make them a bit less bright, and I'm also going to use the ambient slider. The ambient slider is a really useful adjustment. If I bring it all the way across, you can kind of see what it's doing. It's increasing the brightness in the midtones of the photo, and it's also making them warmer and making them a bit more uniform. Obviously I'm not going to use it at 100%, just going to dial it right back to maybe around 19 or 20. The next tool that I'm going to use is a sharpening tool. So if we click on Tools and go to Details, we can access our sharpening tools. There's a slider icon at the bottom of the screen. If we click on that, we can see we have structure and sharpening available. So I tend to stick to sharpening. Now if I push the sharpening all the way up and zoom in at 100%, you can see a before and after of what the sharpening is doing. Basically, it's increasing the contrast where there's already a bit of contrast. So if you look at the fig closely, you can see that the bright parts of the fig become brighter and the dark parts become darker. We don't want to over sharpen our image. When we introduce sharpening, it can tend to make our photos look a bit grainy. So I'm going to dial that right back, and I'm going to press and hold my finger on the screen to make sure it looks good. What we're really looking for here is kind of for those people that wear glasses, it's almost as if you're taking your glasses off and on. It should just sort of come a bit in and out of focus with your sharpening tool. Okay, so far our image is looking really good, but it's a little bit flat. I'd like to introduce a bit more contrast to it. The tool that I'm going to use to increase the contrast is the Curves tool. So if we click our tools and go to Curves, we are actually presented with a graph. The graph has points on it which can be moved around to manipulate tones manually. You can also manipulate colors in your photograph. But I am actually going to click the swatches icon and use a preset curve. In my case, I'm going to use the soft contrast curve. The soft contrast will apply a gentle darkening to the shadows and brightening to the highlights. I think the image is looking really good. Final thing I might do to it is just add a vignette. So we go to Tools and we scroll right down to the bottom, and at the bottom left we have our vignette tool. With the vignette, we've got a blue point in the center of our image, and if we reverse pinch and pinch, we can change the circumference of a circle around that point. I'm going to make the circle around just what I'm really interested in, which is kind of the central area of the photograph, encompassing the plate with the toast on it. From there, we can move our finger on the screen to the left to lower the brightness of the outside area of the photo as much as we would like. I think that looks really good. I'm going to lock that change in with the tick button, and I think our photo is done. The next image that I'd like to develop is the portrait format photo of the food at an angle. I'm going to adjust the composition of this photo. I'm going to go to Tools and Rotate. I'd like to bring the horizon line level to the grid lines in the overlay that we have here. I'm going to use the crop tool to bring the composition in a little bit. I'm happy with that. Go to Tune Image and make some similar adjustments that we made to our last photo. I'm going to bring the shadows down slightly. And I'm going to use my ambience slider to increase the brightness and the warmth of the midtones. Once again, if I put my finger on the screen, hold and release, you can see what it's doing, particularly to the crust on the toast. I'm happy with the appearance of that, so I'm going to lock that change in with the tick. Now, we have an issue with this photo that we didn't have with our last photo. I think we need to make a particular part of the photo brighter. The front of the toast is looking a bit too dark to me. So we want to make a change to just that area of the image. To do that, I'm going to use one of the most powerful tools in Snapseed, which is the Selective tool. If I go to my tools, I can go to Selective on the left. With Selective, you can add an adjustment point to your image. I'm going to add a point to the front of the toast that I want to brighten. Right now the point says B. If I put my finger anywhere on the screen and scroll up or down, I can see I have a range of adjustments that I could make with this point. If you reverse pinch and pinch with your fingers, you see a red area highlighted around the point. The red area is anywhere where this point is going to affect. So I'd like to make the red area encompass most of the front of the toast. Then I'm going to put my finger anywhere on the screen and move it to the right to increase the brightness of the red highlighted area. If I put my finger on the screen, hold and release, I can see my before and after, and I'm really happy with the change that's made. Another change that I'd like to make to this photo that we didn't make to our last photo is a healing change. I think the nails in the front are a little bit distracting and I'd like to get rid of them. To do that, I'm going to go to Tools and use my healing tool. I'd like to zoom in by reverse pinching and get really close in this case. I'm going to paint red over the nail that I'd like to get rid of, and it's gone. I'm going to move across, get rid of this nail, and move up and get rid of this nail that's in the shadows here. Okay, so this image looks really good. I'm very happy with it, but before we move on, I'm just going to talk about two important aspects of Snapseed. The first is reversing changes that you've made. So at the top of the screen, you can see an icon with two squares and a reverse arrow over the top of it. If you click that, you can see you get an option to undo the last change that you've made, to revert your image back to what it originally looked like, or to view your edit stack. The edit stack allows you to see all the changes that you've made to your photo in order, and you can go to any one of those changes and reverse them. The next important thing I'd like to talk about with Snapseed is Looks. Looks is at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. If you click on Looks, you can see you get a range of almost like filter style overlays that you could apply to your image, but these are not filters. Each look in Snapseed is actually a set of tool style adjustments, and each particular adjustment can be modified by going into your edit stack. Now I'm going to scroll all the way to the right and click the plus icon. This is going to allow me to save most of the changes that I've made to this photo as a look that I can then apply to my next photo. I'm going to save this look as Angled Food Photo Edit, Angled Food Photo. So now I'm going to export this particular photo. Open our final photo now. I'm going to get a head start on this by going to Looks and selecting the look that I've just saved for Angled Food and applying it to this image. I'm going to have to add a couple of things to this to make it look just right, but it gives us a bit of a head start, which is great. Okay, so here are our final food photos, our flat lay style photograph and our angled food photographs. I'm really pleased with the result. I think they look very professional, and I hope that watching this video has given you some ideas for your own food photography and given you some inspiration and showing you that you can achieve very professional looking results using just your smartphone and natural daylight. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.